welcome to the 78th episode of Jazzology presented by Savage Content. I'm your host, Willard Jenkins, and we're here giving two jazz fans the opportunity to compete for a chance to win $100. Each contestant will be asked questions worth 2 points. If they're unable to answer correctly, their opponent will have a chance to steal the question for 1 point. We'll ask 10 questions, and at the end of the 10 questions, the person with the lowest score will get a bonus question for the opportunity to tie the score, no matter how far they're behind in the score. If they're successful, the game will go to sudden death. The person in the lead at the end of regulation will go first, and each contestant will take turns trying to answer the sudden death multiple choice question until we have a winner. Our returning champion for this 78th episode of Jazzology is Bob Blumenthal. Bob Blumenthal was a contributing editor of the Boston Phoenix and a contributor to the Boston Globe. He was one of 6 commissioners who selected the White House Record Library and has written hundreds of album notes, of which 2 won Grammy Awards. Bob Blumenthal's book, Jazz, An Introduction to the History and Legends Behind America's Music, was hailed as the single best compact introduction to jazz currently available by the Wall Street Journal. His second book, Saxophone Colossus, A Portrait of Sonny Rollins, was written in collaboration with photographer John Abbott. In 2005, Bob Blumenthal received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Jazz Journalists Association. Our challenger for this 78th episode of Jazzology is pianist, composer, and bandleader Arturo O'Farrill. Born in Mexico City and raised in New York City, and he pursued formal education at the Manhattan School of Music and the Aaron Copland School of Music at Queens College, where he focused on jazz theory and composition. In the 1980s, Arturo O'Farrill joined the Carl LeBlay Big Band before going on to collaborate with the renowned Dizzy Gillespie United Nation Orchestra. He also collaborated with Harry Belafonte, Lester Bowie, Steve Turre, and more, further solidifying his reputation as a versatile player and adept arranger. In 1995, Arturo O'Farrill was named pianist and music director of the Chico O'Farrill being his renowned father, of the Chico O'Farrill Afro-Cuban Jazz Orchestra, an ensemble he would go on to lead following his father's death in 2011. Arturo O'Farrill is based in Brooklyn, where he lives with his wife, classical pianist Allison Dean. Their sons, Zach O'Farrill and Adam O'Farrill, are also rising musicians and frequent collaborators. And now let's get to today's Jazzology questions. And as our reigning champion, Bob Blumenthal goes first. You ready, Bob?
I am ready. I just want to say it's a pleasure to meet Arturo, even virtually, having been a fan of his music and his father's, and had the privilege of writing liner notes for his father once upon a time.
Absolutely. What a privilege it is to have both of you here. Bob, the great Duke Ellington Orchestra alto saxophonist Johnny Hodges began his career playing with which of the following bands? Did Johnny Hodges begin his career playing with the Lloyd Scott Band, A, B, the Sidney Bechet Band, C, the Lucky Roberts Band, D, the Chick Webb Band, or E, all of the above?
Well, to begin one's career, one thinks of a single answer, not all of the above. So I'm going to eliminate that. I don't know that Lucky Roberts ever led a band of any size. I think of him as a solo pianist. I believe that in the years before he joined Ellington, Sidney Bechet would have been in Europe. It's funny, when you asked the question, the name Wilbur Sweetman came up in my mind, and he's not on the list. So to me, it's between Lloyd Scott and Chick Webb, and I'm pretty sure that the answer is D, Chick Webb.
That is incorrect, Bob. And Arturo O'Farrill will now have an opportunity to steal the point.
I'm so glad you got that wrong answer first, Bob, because that's exactly where I was going. I'm gonna go ahead and take a while because I'm pretty sure the Sidney Bechet.
Oh, let me repeat the question for our audience. The great Duke Ellington Orchestra alto saxophonist Johnny Hodges began his career playing with which of the following bands? Is that A, Lloyd Scott, B, Sidney Bechet, C, Lucky Roberts, D, Chick Webb has been eliminated, or E, all of the above?
Well, we can't really say all of the above since Chick Webb has been eliminated. And I'm going to head towards Sidney Bechet.
The correct answer to that question is E, all of the above.
Oh, wow.
Yes, Johnny Hodges played with all of those bands in the beginning of his career.
Mm-hmm.
So Bob, or Arturo, you're up next. Arturo, the contemporary saxophonist Lakeisha Benjamin grew up in which of the following New York neighborhoods? Did Lakeisha Benjamin grow up in A, Fort Greene in Brooklyn, B, Harlem, C, Hell's Kitchen, D, Tribeca, or E, Washington Heights?
I know Lakeisha, and I can't pick up any Washington Heights accent in her voice. I'm listening for her now in my brain, and what I pick up is a little bit of Brooklyn, Fort Greene.
That is incorrect.
What?
Now, Bob with an opportunity to steal the point. Bob, the fast-rising contemporary saxophonist Lakeisha Benjamin grew up in which of the following New York neighborhoods? A, Fort Greene has been eliminated. B, Harlem. C, Hell's Kitchen. D, Tribeca. Or E, Washington Heights?
Well, I have to say that I think I knew Lakeisha grew up in New York, and that's about as far as my knowledge went. And not really being able to distinguish among the different options here, I would have to take a wild guess based on nothing other than wouldn't it be nice if she grew up in the neighborhood where Thelonious Monk and his family lived? So I'll say C, Hell's Kitchen.
That too is incorrect. Lakeisha Benjamin grew up in E, Washington Heights,
Okay.
the Dominican neighborhood in Manhattan.
Okay.
Lakeisha grew up in Washington Heights. So, Bob, you're up next. And we're still trying to have a breakthrough here on the scores. Shirley Scott, known as the Queen of the Organ, earned her bachelor's and master's degrees in music at which of the following universities? Did Shirley Scott earn her bachelor's and master's at A, Lincoln University, B, Temple University, C, Cheyney State University, D, Villanova University, or E, Drexel University?
Well, I know Shirley was from the Philadelphia area, I believe, or at least her professional career began there. And I believe Lincoln University is in the Midwest, though I may be wrong about that. So looking at the Philadelphia area universities, and again, I have to say I'm just taking a stab at this. I would say B, Temple University.
And actually, Lincoln University is indeed in Pennsylvania.
Oh, there may be one in Missouri also, but...
Yeah, sure. So now it's Arturo's turn to try and steal the point. Arturo,
I'm happy to take a guess because I also don't know. Though I know the temples in Philly. I've been in Philly my whole life. I'm going to go with Villanova.
Let me repeat the question.
Okay.
Shirley Scott, who is known as the Queen of the Organ, earned her bachelor's and master's degrees in music at which of the following universities? Would that be A, Lincoln University, B, Temple University, C, Cheyney State University, D, Villanova University, or E, Drexel University?
Okay, I'm going to go into deep mode here for a second. Drexel.
That too is incorrect. Shirley Scott studied at Cheyney State University.
Wow.
Which is an HBCU in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania.
Beautiful.
So Arturo, you're up next. Arturo, the late bebop pianist Sonny Clark was born with which of the following names? Would that be A, William Clark, B, John Clark, C, Conrad Clark, D, Francis Clark, or E, Percival Clark?
Wow. I didn't know all those names existed. Where's the Juan? Where's Juan Clark? Where's Jimenez? I don't see Jimenez. I'm going to have to take a blind stab at this, though. I'm a big fan. I will just go ahead and check Percival.
Percival? Percival would be E. That's incorrect. And Bob with a chance to steal the question.
Oh, finally, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The late bebop pianist Sonny Clark was born with which of the following names? Would that be A, William Clark, B, John Clark, C, Conrad Clark, D, Francis Clark, and E, Percival Clark has been eliminated?
Well, finally, I feel like I have an advantage here because about a year ago, I wrote the booklet for the Mosaic reissue of Sonny Clark's Blue Note recordings. John Clark is a great horn player, French horn player.
Yes.
And William and Francis, I don't know. But it's C. Conrad Clark. And in fact, his middle name, if I get a bonus point, but probably not, was Yeatis, Yeatis. He was born Conrad Yeatis.
No wonder he called himself Sonny. That is correct. Sonny Clark was born Conrad Clark. So the score is Bob 1, Arturo nothing. We've got a tight one going today, folks. Bob, your turn is next. Bob, which jazz great is associated with the ensemble known as the Gramercy Five? Would that be A, Woody Herman, B, Stan Getz, C, Artie Shaw, D, Harry Carney, or E, Mary Lou Williams?
Well, I know the answer, so I don't know how much of my thought process is going to be of value. Woody Herman was affiliated with the Woodchoppers, and Harry Carney was affiliated with a lot of assumed names for the Ellington Band. And I'm not sure that Mary Lou Williams or Stan Getz were involved with any ensembles that had creative names. Can we call them that? But Artie Shaw C, I believe, is the correct answer for the Gramercy Five.
And that is indeed correct. And we're at the point of our mid-show break. And this week, we're spotlighting No Regrets, the music and spirit of Billie Holiday, an in-depth 13-episode radio and live streaming documentary series celebrating Billie Holiday's extraordinary musical legacy. The program explores her early life, Billy's groundbreaking singing style, and the powerful impact her rendition of Strange Fruit had on the civil rights movement. Produced by the award-winning producer Steve Robinson and written by yours truly, No Regrets is narrated by Rhonda Hamilton. The series features interviews with Angela Davis, Cassandra Wilson, Beth Roars, Andromeda Toure, Diane Reeves, Phil Schaap, Dee Dee Bridgewater, Dan Morgenstern, Renee Marie, and many others. All episodes of No Regrets, the music and spirit of Billie Holiday, are available to free stream and can be accessed at savagecontent.com. And now, Arturo, as a first-timer on Jazzology, you get to answer our essential mid-show question. And that is, how did you, Arturo O'Farrill, fall in love with jazz?
Wow. That actually, I actually remember the moment I fell in love with jazz. I was a decent pianist at the age of 6. So I was sent to Manhattan School of Music, but I really had no interest in the music of my father or his friends. I thought they were all crazy. They tended to smoke jazz cigarettes late into the night and party. I was really into Elton John and Chicago and Earth, Wind and Fire. But my mother and father kept their record collection under lock and key. And there's no way to get a kid to break into anything unless you put it under lock and key. So at the age of 12, I broke into my father's record collection. I pulled out the first record I could find, and it was Miles Davis's Greatest Hits with that picture of Miles just looking at you. And, of course, the liner notes, which you should both be familiar with, by George Fraser, the warlord of the Weegians, in which George waxes eloquent about Miles's fashion, his sense of jackets, and pants, and girlfriends. Not a word about it until the end. He says, well, I hear he's a trumpet player and that he shows promise. I was man. I put that record on my father's turntable, and the first notes out of that record are Ron Carter, ba-doo-doo, 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 and then Tony Williams, and then Herbie, ba-ba-ba-ba-doo-da, and my life was torn into pieces. 7 Steps to Heaven, and I heard Miles, and I never heard anybody play like that. And then, of course, the venerable master George Coleman. But then I heard Herbie solo. I could sing it for you note for note now, 40 years later. And he begins to play it. I literally knew deep inside my soul that the most important thing I could ever do was learn to play like that. Then if I could learn to play like Herbie, I would be a happy human being. Of course, it didn't turn out that way. Many different ways along the path we find ourselves. But I forever will be grateful to my father for locking up his record collection, Miles Davis for bringing Herbie Hancock into my life, and Herbie Hancock for playing that an unbelievable lesson in what I call DNA African rhythmic code, which is the center of my soul.
Well, speaking of the center of your soul, you've got an amazing new project that is developing. Tell us about that, please.
Well, after founding the Afro-Latin Jazz Orchestra 17 years ago and creating a nonprofit structure around it called the Afro-Latin Jazz Alliance, we've spent a ton of energy, not just creating music that earned 8 Grammy Awards and changed the conversation about Afro-Latin jazz. Not just that, but we spent an awful lot of energy teaching and preserving this culture. And we've done this right now we started with 1 school, 6 teachers, 6 concerts, and now we're in 29 schools with 47 teaching artists. We raised tens of thousands of dollars to bring instruments into the lives of New York City school children. And we've been doing this forever and ever and ever, and grown and grown and grown to the point where we never had a brick and mortar home. But the people of East Harlem asked the city to provide them with affordable housing. And so a contractor named Mega invited us to join as the cultural component. And lo and behold, I'm grateful to Laurie Cumbo, Cultural Commissioner of the City of New York, and, of course, so many others who have awarded that contract to Mega and invited us to build Casa Bilongo on 118th Street and Park Avenue in Timbali Terrace. Those 2 floors will be dedicated to community culture, to healthy eating. We'll have a community cafe, a jazz club at night called Chico's Corner. And what the most beautiful thing about it is that it's all about this struggle that we all are in right now, which is to recognize the people of East Harlem, because largely Hispanic, largely Black. It's not the sexy part of Harlem. It's the beautiful part of Harlem, though. It's the part of Harlem where the people are still clinging to the hope that this is a just, fair nation. And so I can't possibly be happier than to be able to bring Casa Bilongo to the beautiful people of East Harlem. 350 seat state-of-the-art theater, by the way, which is not just for the Afro Latin Jazz Orchestra. We're inviting everyone to come and be a part of this cultural, sacred space. I really feel honored to be able to lead this organization.
And when is the grand opening of Casa Bilongo?
Ground breaks in January of this 26, and then we take possession for our architects to design Casa Bilongo a year after that, so January 27. But by law, because so much city funding is involved in the creation of the building, 2 years. So 3 years from now, you are all invited to the grand opening of Casa Bilongo on the corner of 118th Street and Park Avenue.
Excellent. Excellent. Can't wait for that. Fantastic. And Bob, you've already responded to that original question, but I got to ask you a question that Colleen has raised, and that is there a particular jazz musician you feel a personal connection to, even if you've never met?
Well, first, let me just mention to Arturo that if George Frazier wrote the liner notes, I'm surprised he didn't talk about Duende, because this was one of his big things. He didn't like the concept charisma. He preferred Duende, and Miles Davis was kind of exhibit A. There are two musicians whose music meant a lot to me and who I got to know personally. So I'd have to say Sonny Rollins and Betty Carter. People who I idolized before I ever met them early in my journalistic career, got to have several interactions with them, and really meant a lot to me in a way as role models, even though I'm not a musician, just about their spirit of independence, their spirit of living life on their own terms, and being their own harshest critics. And those are the people who I would say stand out in my experience.
Sonny Rollins and Betty Carter.
Yeah.
That's a pretty strong duo. Thank you, Bob. This week's album of the week is by the young vocalist Tyreek McDowell. It's titled Open Up Your Senses. And Tyreek comes out of a variety of different influences, including Leon Thomas. He's kind of in that vein as a modern day Leon Thomas. And I say that not just because he does a wonderful job recreating the Leon Thomas Pharoah Sanders collaboration. The creator has a master plan. But Tyreek McDowell is his name. The album is called Open Up Your Senses. Arturo, you're up next. Arturo O'Farrill, who wrote the bebop classic tune Sure Enough? Was that A, Dizzy Gillespie, B, Miles Davis, C, Charlie Parker, D, Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, or E, Thelonious Monk?
I'm going to have to go with Dizzy Gillespie. I played this tune a lot when I was coming up as a musician, and I'm going to have to go with Dizzy. Wow.
Unfortunately, that is incorrect, and Bob has a chance to steal the point. Bob, who wrote the classic bebop tune, Sure Enough? A, Dizzy Gillespie has been eliminated. Would that have been B, Miles Davis? C, Charlie Parker? D, Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie? Or E, Thelonious Monk?
Well, I would eliminate Miles Davis because I don't believe he had arrived in New York at the time Sure Enough was recorded. I believe he came in the autumn of 45 and it was recorded in the spring or something like that. It definitely does not sound like a Monk tune. And I believe the answer is D, Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. I've always been fascinated by co-composers of pieces. And I actually asked Dizzy about this once. He wasn't particularly enlightening. But if you think about this piece, the introduction is distinct from the melody. And I've always thought, in this case, Dizzy must have written the intro and Bird must have written the melody. So I'm going with D, Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie.
That is indeed correct. That is correct. And you have stolen that point, Bob. And you're up next. Bob, the guitarist Diego Figueiredo is a native of what Brazilian city? Is Diego from A, Belo Horizonte, B, Rio de Janeiro, C, Salvador, Bahia, D, Franca, or E, Brasilia?
Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with this guitarist. I'm going to have to go back to my experience long, long ago as a high school student who was on a summer exchange program in Brazil. And at the time, Brasilia was only about 5 years old and nobody wanted to be there. Everybody who worked for the government was very upset that they had moved the government from Rio. They would all leave on the weekends. They basically had built no housing for anyone. So I'm going to eliminate Brasilia. And just out of my own personal experience, I'm going to say A, Belo Horizonte.
That is incorrect. Arturo with an opportunity to steal the point. Arturo, the guitarist Diego Figueiredo is a native of what Brazilian city? A, Belo Horizonte has been eliminated. B, Rio de Janeiro. C, Salvador, Bahia. D, Franca, or E, Brasilia?
I don't know the answer to this, but I'm going to guess the city that I most would like to go to right now, which is Salvador, Bahia. Damn.
Nope. Fortunately, Diego Figueiredo is a native of D, Franca, which may have been the least likely of those cities if you think about it, but he is a native of Franca. Arturo will stay in Brazil. The great Brazilian songwriter Antonio Carlos Jobim hails from what Brazilian city? Is Antonio Carlos Jobim from A, Rio de Janeiro, B, Sao Paulo, C, Manaus, D, Recife, or E, Belo Horizonte?
I don't know the answer to this one, so I'm going to guess again with what the cities that I would most like to go to in Brazil right now. And I would love to go to Sao Paulo.
That is incorrect. And Bob,
you're cracking up my wife.
Bob now has a chance to steal the point again. Bob Blumenthal, the great Brazilian songwriter Antonio Carlos Jobim, hails from what Brazilian city? Is Jobim from A, Rio de Janeiro, B, Sao Paulo has been eliminated, C, Manaus, D, Recife, or E, Belo Horizonte?
Well, my thinking on this is I'm pretty sure that his professional career began in Rio. And in fact, that when he hooked up with João Gilberto, who was from the northeast of Brazil, there was a little culture clash there at the beginning. So I believe the answer is A, Rio de Janeiro.
That is correct. That is indeed correct. So Bob is up 5-0. And Bob, you're up next. Bob, the Cuban vocalist, keyboardist, and percussionist Melvis Santa is a member of whose band? Is Melvis Santa a member of A, Pedrito Martinez Band, B, Bobby Sanabria, C, Kenny Garrett, D, Ravi Coltrane, or E, Christian McBride?
Could you give me the instruments that the individual plays, or was it vocals? That vocalist, keyboardist, and percussionist?
Vocalist, keyboardist, and percussionist.
Okay. I would think that it would be a band that dealt with Afro-Cuban music, and even though both Pedrito and Bobby are percussionists, I assume they are not the only percussionists in their ensembles. And I know at least in the earlier Pedrito Martinez groups I'm familiar with, there were people who doubled on vocals and percussion. So I'm going to go with A, Pedrito Martinez.
That is incorrect. And Arturo with an opportunity to steal the question. Arturo, the Cuban vocalist, keyboardist, and percussionist Melvis Santa is a member of whose band? A, Pedrito Martinez has been eliminated. B, Bobby Sanabria. C, Kenny Garrett. D, Ravi Coltrane. E, Christian McBride.
I'm going to take this as an opportunity to say that Melvis is on our upcoming CD, Live at Town Hall, Original Influencers. And I know for a fact that she works a lot with Kenny Garrett.
That is correct. Melvis Santa is a vocalist, percussionist, and keyboardist with NEA Jazz Master Kenny Garrett. So Arturo, you're up next. Arturo, which of the following musicians did not, I emphasize, did not perform on the famous June 18th, 1978 White House concert honoring the 25th anniversary of the Newport Jazz Festival? Which of these musicians did not play on that concert? Would that have been A, Eubie Blake, B, Ornette Coleman, C, Cecil Taylor, D, Max Roach, or E, Hank Jones?
I do not know the answer to that one, but I would go so far as to say that outside of the mainstream would be the most likely person to play at the White House, and so I'm going to have to go with Cecil Taylor.
Bob, and I'll have a comment on that in a moment, but Bob, with an opportunity to steal the point, Bob, which of the following musicians did not perform on the famous June 18th, 1978 White House concert honoring the 25th anniversary of the Newport Jazz Festival? Which of them did not? Would that have been A, Eubie Blake, B, Ornette Coleman, C, Cecil Taylor has been eliminated, D, Max Roach, or E, Hank Jones?
Well, I was hoping that Arturo would have picked Ornette Coleman, because I was in attendance and I can distinctly recall that both Eubie Blake, Cecil Taylor, and Max Roach all performed. So to me, it was between Hank Jones and Ornette Coleman. And because I don't recall Hank Jones being there, I'm going to say the answer is E, Hank Jones.
That is correct. And Arturo, there was a very famous I guess you should say episode in that particular concert where Cecil Taylor performed solo, and Jimmy Carter, who was the president and the host of that event, after Cecil Taylor performed, Jimmy Carter ran up to Cecil, very excited about hearing him perform what he did perform on that program.
If I can add a couple of anecdotes about the experience, I was changing the film in someone's camera at the time, and when the president got up to run after Cecil, I was the one who ended up taking photographs of it.
Right.
Copies of which I still have. The other anecdote I always tell is I was covering the concert for Rolling Stone, and I said, okay, you're going to meet the president. What can I say to the president that will have some impact on him? I don't know anything about the environment or foreign policy or tax reform or whatever. I said, I know what I'm going to say. I'm going to say, Mr. President, our non-relationship with Cuba is doing damage to Cuban culture and United States culture, and you should do something about it. I get up in line. I've got my name tag, Bob Blumenthal, Rolling Stone, and he looks at me and he says, oh, you guys are doing a great job. And I said, thank you, Mr. President. and the irony is, if I were I would never be in the same position today. If I had been in the same position last year meeting President Biden, I would have probably said the same thing if I had one thing to say to him.
There you go. Well, we are now at the point of our bonus round. And according to the rules of Jazzology, Arturo O'Farrill now has an opportunity to catch up in the score by answering this bonus round question correctly. You ready, Arturo?
I guess so.
All right, Arturo. Billie Holiday wrote a few of her signature songs. Which of the following songs did Billie Holiday not write for her repertoire? Would that have been A, God Bless the Child, B, Don't Explain, C, Strange Fruit, D, Fine and Mellow, E, Good Morning Heartache?
Well, I'm going to have to say Strange Fruit.
And you have just tied the score. Because the correct answer was C, Strange Fruit, or E, Good Morning Heartache. Otherwise, Billie Holiday wrote all of those songs, so you have taken advantage of our bonus round rules and tied the score. So that means that we are now at sudden death. And since Bob was ahead at the end of regulation, Bob will go first in sudden death. You ready, Bob?
I am ready.
All right, Bob. When John Coltrane recorded his 1958 album, Bahia, who was the pianist on that date? Would that have been A, Sonny Clark, B, Thelonious Monk, C, Tommy Flanagan, D, Wynton Kelly, or E, Red Garland?
Well, Sonny Clark and John Coltrane only recorded together on Blue Note, and Bahia is on Prestige. Monk and Coltrane recorded for Riverside, and later things have come out on Blue Note. But again, that was a Prestige recording that came out in the early 60s, I believe. I think Tommy Flanagan recorded with John Coltrane on the Kenny Burrell and John Coltrane album. I may be wrong about that. And I don't believe that Wynton Kelly ever recorded with John Coltrane on Prestige. So I'm going to say E, Red Garland.
And that is correct. And that means that Bob Blumenthal is our continuing champion.
All right.
Bob Blumenthal, congratulations on winning the 78th episode of Jazzology. We encourage everyone to try your hand and play Jazzology. If you or anyone you know would like to become a contestant on Jazzology, simply click on the link below and fill out the form. You must be 18 years old or older, and be sure to follow us on social media at Jazzology Trivia Show to get all the latest news and updates. Many thanks to Bob and Arturo and to everyone who joined us for our 78th episode of Jazzology. Remember, if you miss a show live, you can find the archive on the Savage Content YouTube channel. Thank you both. Much appreciated the spirit of competition.
Very fun.